forward. So point number two, going to shift gears to Bitcoin, which over the last few days has been on an absolute tear. I believe it actually broke 50,000 earlier today.
Yep.
Point number two, Bitcoin recovers post ETF approval dip. Timeline gets quiet.
Yeah. So you're right. Again, we have silly people saying silly things. So Rob, let's go back a month because it was just over a month ago that the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, approved 11 Bitcoin ETFs. That stands for exchange traded funds. For people who are new to this channel, it is simply a way for people who have traditional brokerage accounts to get exposure to Bitcoin. Now, if you're listening to this and you want to have exposure to Bitcoin, the best way to do it is to buy it directly into self-custody. And if you're interested, reach out. Deep Knowledge Investing has published a self-custody guide. It is super easy to follow. We have demystified all of it and made it, really simple for people. And it can be, but for some people, they don't want to learn that. They don't want to self-custody. They don't want to have that risk, or for, maybe for regulatory reasons, they have to have their assets all in a traditional brokerage account. And these 11 ETFs make it possible for those people to buy exposure to Bitcoin. And so one of the things we've talked about is going into these approvals, there was a huge debate. Now, there were Bitcoin bulls like myself who said, wait a minute, issuance right now is about 900 coins a day. That's going to be cut in half in the next couple of months. And when you have the ability for all these new people to buy Bitcoin, but not have much of an increase in supply, the thing that will adjust will be the price. And we saw, Bitcoin ran up huge into those announcements. And right about the time when the SEC approved it, the Bitcoin was trading around $44,000, $45,000. It briefly touched, 47 right after the approval. And there also were a lot of people who were saying that it's all priced in, and that as soon as the ETFs are approved, Bitcoin is going to fall off a cliff. It's going to implode. The price is going to be, it's going to crater. And a lot of them said, it'll find its true value, which they believe to be zero. Okay. Great. Let's see. And, one of the things we talked about was Bitcoin went, over the following week from about 44, 45,000 down to about 40,000. It cracked 40,000, to the downside, but it was down a little over 10% in that time. And what we saw were the Bitcoin bears, the people who were anti-Bitcoin, coming out and crowing. They're saying, oh yeah, see, we told you it's collapsing. The price is going down. It's going to zero. All you bulls were wrong. Okay, great. Well, here's what's happened over the last couple of weeks. Bitcoin has gone from around that 40,000 level to, Rob, you're right. Today it crossed 50,000. So it's up from last year. It's up from a couple months ago. It's up from last month. It's up 25% in the last week or two. Right. And so in my opinion, right, this is just me talking. I think it's silly to have a short-term price target on Bitcoin. I think if you own it, the reason to own it is because one of the things we've talked about is fiat issuance, right? The US government is just printing more and more dollars, and that is reducing the purchasing power of your dollars. And so I don't know where Bitcoin is going to be a year from now or 5 years from now, but what I do know is that the purchasing power of the dollar is going to be down a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Inflation always goes in one direction. And so my thesis on Bitcoin is long-term. I want to own this for years and years while the purchasing power of the dollar declines. And this is a great deflationary asset. This is a great way to ensure yourself against loss of purchasing power in the dollar. And that's my thesis. But okay, fine. But for all the people who were so negative and crowing, oh, see, we told you Bitcoin's a zero, it's collapsing. They were doing that based on the price action over a couple of days to a couple of weeks. Okay. But what I've noticed is that my Twitter timeline, my X timeline, has gotten very, very quiet. And none of those people are issuing mea culpas. And one of the things we do at Deep Knowledge Investing, we have not gotten a lot of stock picks wrong, but when we do, and when we lose money and when we take that loss, I always issue the mea culpa. I explain to people, this is what I got wrong. This is what I thought would happen. This is what happened instead, right? We own the mistake. We take responsibility for it, and we acknowledge, okay, we got this wrong. This is why we got it wrong. But I'm noticing that these Bitcoin bears are not doing the same. And I would love to see them have the same humility, the humility to match their hubris, right? Because they were telling all of us, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. But when the dollar price of Bitcoin moves 25% in a couple of weeks, and it's well above that pre-SEC approval level, why are these people so quiet now? Why are they not out saying, okay, yeah, we got it wrong? Because if you're going to claim you were right after 2 days or 2 weeks, well, great. Now it's a month later. So on the basis of the last 2 weeks trading action, admit you were wrong, right? Come out, whatever standard you're setting to declare you were right, that's a standard you use to admit you were wrong.
Don't hold your breath, Gary, waiting for those mea culpas. I think that's probably a study into just human nature in general about why people don't say things when they get things wrong.
Look, I think you're right, Rob, but I will tell you, after more than 30 years in this business, look, it hurts to be wrong. And it's never fun to admit it. It's never fun to admit it publicly, to stand in front of people who have trusted you with their money, with their assets, and say, we lost money on this. This is what I got wrong. It's very hard to do. But I will tell you, in the money management business, the penalty for not doing that, the penalty for that hubris of never admitting you're wrong, is you end up taking massive losses. And nobody's going to be right all the time. But, if you're right most of the time and you don't get crushed in your losers, you can do really well. And a big part of being great in this business is being willing to acknowledge your errors, because if you don't, you convince yourself that everything's fine and you lose more and more and more money. And, I think it would be interesting to find out if any of these anti-Bitcoin people had the courage to short Bitcoin.
Right.
Do they have short exposure on this? I'd love to know that, because I'm taking the other side of that trade right now. But, are they just talking loudly in public, or do they have capital up on that bet? And, one of the ways that we differentiate ourselves here at Deep Knowledge Investing is every stock pick I have, every time I tell you guys, I like this position, I own this, I own it. My capital is up. If I'm wrong, I'm going to lose money, and that's not fun. So I'd love to know, do they have money up on this opinion, or are they just talking in public when they think they're right and quiet in public when they think they're wrong? And I don't think any of that leads to reasoned discourse, or I don't find it persuasive.
Sure. Yeah, probably have a lot of handfuls of everything you just mentioned and in between as well.